There was a night in Egypt when God told an entire people to put a mark on the outside of their houses, blood on the doorpost. And the destroyer passed over every house that carried it. Nobody inside those houses felt anything. No warmth, no shiver, no confirmation. They just went to bed marked and woke up alive. You have been living like that for years, and nobody told you. You clicked on this because of two words. The M. The crescent moon. Somebody showed you a picture of a palm once. The lines crossing in the center, forming a letter. And they told you that letter means you were selected. Somebody else told you about the pale half-moon at the base of your fingernail, and how the people who carry it clearly are carrying something in the spirit. And I'm not going to mock you for looking. I want to say that plainly, right at the beginning, because I think you've already been mocked enough. You've been called dramatic. You've been told you overthink everything. You've had people roll their eyes at you across a dinner table while you tried to explain something you could feel but couldn't prove. So when somebody finally hands you a piece of evidence, something visible, something on your body, something you can hold up to the light, of course you looked. Anybody would look. You weren't being foolish. You were being human. But here is what I need you to hear, and I need you to hear it from someone who is on your side. The mark is real. The place you were told to look for it is wrong. You've been trying to read on your skin something that God wrote on your life. Think about that for a second. The lines on your palm were formed before your 3rd month in the womb. They don't change. They don't respond. They don't know what you survived when you were 19. They didn't move when you buried your father. They didn't rearrange themselves the night you prayed on the bathroom floor with the water running so nobody would hear you. Do you really believe God would put the story of your calling in the one part of you that never changes and never speaks back? He didn't. He put it somewhere much harder to ignore. I'm George. I've spent most of my adult life around people who are hungry for God and confused about themselves at the same time. And I'll tell you what I've noticed. The ones who are actually marked almost never find it on their hands. They find it in the pattern. The strange, repeating, undeniable pattern of a life that keeps going a certain way, no matter how hard they try to make it go the normal way. That's layer 1. That's the surface. That's what people see and chase and screenshot and send to each other at midnight. Let's go under it. Let me give you the image I want you to carry through this whole message. There's a clay jar. Ordinary, cheap, the kind you'd find in any house in the ancient world, holding water or oil or grain. Nothing about it is special. And at some point, it cracks. Maybe it was dropped. Maybe it was fired wrong. Maybe somebody knocked it off a shelf in a hurry. A cracked jar is worthless for holding water. Everybody knows that. You throw it out. But if you put a lamp inside a cracked jar and carry it through a dark field, that jar becomes the only thing in the world that can be seen. The light gets out through the exact places where it was broken, and the shape of the crack decides the shape of the light. That's the mark. Not on your palm, on the places where you cracked. Now let me name them, because I think you already know these, and you've just never had permission to call them what they are. The first mark is the veiled name. People get your name wrong. Not the spelling, though sometimes that too. They get you wrong. They meet you and file you under something that isn't you. Quiet, intense, difficult, too much, too soft. And you've spent years half correcting the record, then giving up. Because explaining yourself started to feel more exhausting than being misunderstood. There's a girl in the Bible whose whole calling ran on a veiled name. Her name was Hadassah. That's the Hebrew. That's the name her people gave her. But she walked into the palace of Persia as Esther, a Persian name. A name that hid what she was. and she kept it hidden. On purpose. Under instruction. For years. Everyone in that palace looked at her and saw a beautiful foreign girl who had won a contest. Nobody saw a Jewish orphan carrying the survival of a nation in her bloodline. The name they used for her was not the name that mattered. You've lived that. You've had a whole room full of people using the wrong name for you. That's not rejection. That's cover. God hides what he intends to use late. And while we're here, let me deal with the letter itself, since it's the reason half of you clicked. People look at that M, and they want it to stand for something. Marked, money, miracle, messenger. I've heard all of them. And every one of those readings has the same problem. It turns your identity into a guessing game, where you're trying to crack a code God never wrote in code. Here's the only mark of a name I find in Scripture that God actually promises to a person. At the end of the book, he says he will give the one who overcomes a white stone, and on that stone, a new name written, and here's the line that undoes me every time, a name that no one knows except the one who receives it. Not a letter anybody can read off your hand. A name so private that even the people who love you most will never be able to pronounce it. Do you know what that does to the whole search? It ends it. You are not looking for a symbol that a stranger on the internet can interpret for you. You are carrying a name that has no public version. That's why nobody has ever been able to fully describe you. That's why every label people put on you has felt slightly off, like a coat cut for a different body. They're not being cruel. They're working with the wrong alphabet. The second mark is the crescent. Now I'm going to give you back your moon. But I'm going to give it back to you true. The moon has no light. Not one particle. Everything you have ever seen of the moon was borrowed. It's a rock in the dark that happens to be positioned where the sun can find it. And because of that position, it lights up highways and oceans and the faces of people who can't sleep. And a crescent moon is not a broken moon. A crescent is a whole moon that is mostly turned away from the light for now. Nothing is missing. The rock is complete. You're just seeing the sliver that's currently catching the sun. If your life feels like a sliver right now, if the amount of you that is visible to the world is a thin curve of what you know is actually in there, that's not failure. That's phase. And I want you to notice something about how God set it up in the very beginning. He made the greater light for the day and the lesser light for the night. He didn't make the night lightless. He assigned somebody to it. Some people are called to shine at noon, in front of everyone, in full heat. And some people were assigned to the night shift, to be the only light in somebody's dark. That's not a demotion. Ask anybody who's ever been awake at 3 in the morning with something terrible in their chest what the moon meant to them. The third mark is the doorpost. You have survived things that should have taken you. I'm not being dramatic. Sit with your own history for a second. There's an exit you didn't take. There's a car you weren't in. There's a version of that season where you didn't come back, and you know exactly what it looks like, because you got close enough to see it. Something passed over you. There was a house in Egypt with blood smeared on the frame, and inside that house, a family ate a hurried meal, with their shoes on, and they had no idea whether it was working. They didn't feel protected. They felt terrified. The mark wasn't for them to see. The mark was for what was moving through the streets to see. That's why you never felt chosen while you were being kept. The mark on you was never facing inward. It was facing out. The fourth mark is the hands, not the lines, the where. You do things that cost you, and you don't send an invoice. You're the one who stayed late. You're the one who got the phone call at 11:40 at night and picked up. You're the one who drove 4 hours because somebody's world fell apart and there wasn't anybody else. And here's how you know it's a mark, and not just a personality. You can't stop. You've tried. You've promised yourself you'd stop giving that much to people who won't do it for you. And you lasted about 9 days. And then somebody was drowning in front of you, and your hands moved before your mind could argue. That's not weakness. That's assignment. Assignment always looks like weakness, until you see what it produces. I think about a woman I knew who worked the early shift at a diner off the highway. 5 in the morning, 6 days a week, 31 years. She'd tell you she never did anything with her life. No platform, no title, nothing anybody would print in a program. But there was a stretch of counter 4 stools by the window where the same men sat every morning. Truck drivers. A widower. A kid who'd just gotten out of the county jail and couldn't get anybody to look him in the eye, and she poured coffee and remembered names and asked about surgeries and knew exactly which one of them hadn't eaten a real meal in 3 days. When she died, that diner could not hold the funeral crowd. They stood in the parking lot. She would have told you she had no calling. She served the presence of God at a Formica counter at 5 in the morning for 3 decades, and the only reason anybody knows is that 140 people showed up to say so. Your hands are already doing that somewhere. You just haven't counted it as ministry, because nobody clapped. The 5th mark is the emptying room. People leave you. Not always in anger, sometimes they just drift. And you notice years later that the person who used to be at every birthday hasn't texted since the spring. I've watched this break people. I've sat in a laundromat at 11 at night, the only 2 people in the place. Her folding towels she'd already folded once, while a woman told me she thought there was something fundamentally wrong with her, because nobody stays. And I told her what I'm telling you. Some rooms get emptied because you failed, and some rooms get emptied because God is clearing space for what He's about to say to you, and He will not say it over noise. Look at Esther again. Before the palace, she had no father and no mother. The text says it plainly, without softening it. Everything that should have been around her was already gone before her story started. Her room was empty, first. Then Mordecai, then the palace, then the crown. The clearing was not the punishment. The clearing was the preparation. The 6th mark is the delay. Everything in your life arrives late. Not never. Late, the job came. But 8 years after the people you started with. The healing came. But after you'd already learned to live with the limp. The understanding came. But after the relationship was already over, and you couldn't use it anymore. You've watched people who put in a fraction of what you put in walk straight through doors that stayed locked for you. And you've said the words out loud, alone in your car, in that voice you'd never use in front of anybody. Why is it so hard for me? Because you're not being processed on the same timeline. Cheap things are made fast. That's not a saying, that's just how making works. Esther spent 12 months in preparation before she was allowed one night in front of the king. 12 months of oils and perfumes and silence. A whole year of being made ready for something that would be decided in a single conversation. And then she saved a nation with that conversation. 12 months. For one night. That's the ratio nobody wants. Stop for a second. How many of those did you count? Not how many sounded nice. How many landed in your stomach? Because there's a difference. And your body knows it. Information lands in your head. Recognition lands lower. If something I just said made you sit up slightly, or made your eyes sting for a reason you couldn't defend, that wasn't me. I'm a man talking into a microphone. I don't have that kind of reach into your chest. Something else was in the room. God does not move things without purpose. If this message reached you today, there was a reason before you ever clicked. The secret protocol carries the 7 keys that reveal what was deposited in you before your birth, and what the Spirit is beginning to awaken in this exact season. The full audiobook is included to walk with you in your quiet moments. And the Awakening Map, as a bonus unveiling the 5 stages of spiritual awakening, where you have been, where you are, and what is coming. Link pinned in the first comment. But divine windows do not stay open indefinitely. I say that plainly because I've watched too many people feel something real and then let the week bury it. Monday comes. The car needs tires. Somebody's sick, and the thing that was moving in you at 11 at night gets filed under that was a weird night and never touched again. Don't let this be one of those. Now we go to the bottom. Because everything I've told you so far is still about you, your marks, your seasons, your delays. And if we stop there, this is just a nicer story about yourself. And you don't need a nicer story about yourself. You need the truth about why any of it happened. Here it is. The mark was never given to you so you could feel special. The mark was given so you could be found when it was time. There's a moment in Ezekiel where God sends a man through a city with a writing kit and tells him to go through the streets and put a mark on the foreheads of everyone who grieves over what's happening in that city. Not the strong ones, not the loud ones, the ones who were sighing, the ones who were sick over it when everybody else had adjusted. And that grief, that useless, exhausting, invisible grief that nobody thanked them for, that was the identifier. That was how heaven picked them out of the crowd. Do you understand what that means for you? The thing you've been apologizing for might be the thing you were identified by. The sensitivity you've tried to sand down. The way you can't watch certain things on the news. The way you know when somebody walks into a room carrying something heavy before they say a word. The way you've cried over people you barely knew. You've called that a defect. Heaven's been using it as a name tag, and there's a second thing at the bottom, and it's harder. The mark is not only read by God. The night Esther's people were scheduled to be destroyed, somebody had already done the paperwork. There was a decree. There was a date. Somebody had studied that nation carefully enough to want it gone. Nothing writes a decree against something worthless. I don't say that to frighten you. I say it because you've spent years thinking the opposition in your life was proof you were doing something wrong. Every attempt that got sabotaged. Every relationship where you finally opened your hands and got them slapped. The strange, disproportionate resistance around things that should have been simple. You thought that meant you weren't chosen. Resistance means somebody read the mark before you did. Let me come back to the jar. Here's the part I left out. In the field, in the dark, the jar was never the point. Nobody carried it for its own sake. The jar existed to hold a lamp, and to protect that lamp from the wind, and then at the right moment, at the sound of a signal to be broken open, so the light could hit everything at once. The cracks weren't damage. The cracks were the preview. And I want to say something that might land hard. Some of you have been praying for God to seal the cracks. That's been the whole content of your prayer life for 2 years. Fix me. Make me normal. Make me able to sleep like other people. Make me stop feeling everything. He hasn't answered that prayer. And you've taken the silence personally. He isn't ignoring you. He's just not going to seal the only place the light gets out. Come back to the Crescent with me for a second, because I want to give you something practical. And it's the only practical thing in this entire message. You cannot rush a phase. Nobody has ever pushed the moon. But you can stop mistaking the phase for the verdict. Here's what that looks like in a normal week. It looks like not making permanent decisions about your worth on a Tuesday night when you're tired. It looks like refusing to read your whole life through the thin sliver that happens to be visible right now. It looks like remembering that the dark part of the moon is not missing, it's just not currently facing the light. I sat with a man once in the waiting room of a tire shop, of all places. Bad coffee, television on mute, both of us stuck there for an hour. And he told me his life was over. He was 53. Second divorce. His kids weren't speaking to him. He said, and I remember the exact words, "I think I already had my shot." I asked him one question. I asked him whether he still cared about God. And this big man in a work jacket sat in a plastic chair in a tire shop and could not answer me, because he'd started crying. That's not a man whose shot is over. Dead things don't ache. That ache was the lamp still burning inside a jar he'd written off as garbage. He'd been staring at his crescent and calling it the whole moon. So what do you actually do? Not much. And it's harder than it sounds. You stop performing it. The marked people who lose their way almost always lose it the same way they find out they're carrying something, and immediately start trying to prove it. They announce it. They post about it. They look for someone to confirm it. And the second a calling becomes a performance, it stops feeding anybody, including the person carrying it. Esther didn't announce. She hid her identity for years, and she only revealed it one time, at one table, at the one moment when revealing it would cost her everything or save everyone. That's the whole discipline of a marked life in one story. You hold it quietly until the moment it's meant to be spent. And then the second thing. You stop asking God to explain the mark before you obey it. You want the map first. Everybody does. You want to know where this is going, how long it takes, what it costs, who's coming with you. And the answer you get back is almost always the same shape it was for her. Who knows whether you have come for such a time as this? Who knows? Not here's the plan. Who knows? She walked into that throne room without a guarantee. She said the sentence people quote on posters, "If I perish, but nobody ever says it in the tone she meant it." That's not a brave slogan. That's a woman who has run out of alternatives deciding to go anyway. That's the actual texture of being chosen. It's not glowing. It's going. I want to speak to one person now. You've had this thing on you since childhood. You knew before you had words for it. And somewhere between then and now, you made a quiet agreement with yourself that it was probably imagination. Because keeping it felt like arrogance, and nobody around you would have understood. You've been living underneath your own life ever since. And every so often a song, a verse, a sentence from a stranger, a message like this one, it comes back up and knocks on the inside of your ribs, and you feel that old thing stir, and you don't know whether to trust it. Trust it. Not because I said so. Because it has never once left you alone. Things that aren't real go away. This one has followed you through every version of yourself. Through the years you weren't praying. Through the seasons you were angry at God and told Him so. Through the relationships that took you far from anything holy. It waited. It's still here. That's not psychology. Psychology gives up. The blood on the doorpost didn't glow either. Those families never saw it working. They just woke up on the other side of a night that took everyone else's firstborn and understood in the morning what had been true all along. You're going to understand in the morning too. So before you go, I want one thing from you, and I want it specific. Don't tell me you have the M. Don't tell me about the moon on your nail. I want you to tell me about the crack. Go down in the comments and tell me the place you broke that never healed the way it was supposed to. And tell me what came out of your life because of it. Who you understood that you couldn't have understood before. Who you sat with. What you can carry now that would have crushed you at 25. Tell me the crack, and tell me the light. Both. That's the comment I'm looking for, and I'll read them. not skim read. Because I have watched people find each other in that comment section and realize they were never the only one. And that's worth more to me than any number on a screen. Here's where I leave you. There is a lamp inside you that you did not light and cannot extinguish. It has been burning through every year you thought you were wasting, through every empty room, through every door that opened 8 years late. The jar around it has taken damage. That's true. You've got cracks you can name and cracks you can't. But it's night out there, and a whole jar doesn't help anyone in the dark. Carry it.